This is one of the scariest videos online. Experiment shows how intense radiation heat leaves behind a shadow. Days later he died, but doctors said it wasn't from this experiment.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Angel Resendez. Also known as the Railroad Killer, Angel is said to have committed somewhere around 23 horrific crimes during his spree in both the United States and Mexico in the 1990s. He went on to become known as the Railroad Killer because of the fact that most of his crimes were committed near railroads, where he had just jumped off of trains he was using to travel around the country. Most of his crimes took place in the homes of those he harmed, and usually after the crimes he'd linger around to eat their food and sometimes steal their sentimental items. Sometimes he'd even take jewelry to re-gift to his mother and sister. In June of 1999, he was listed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, and when his sister saw him there, she was worried he would continue harming people, so she thankfully contacted the authorities. After this, they were able to convince him to surrender and he was sent to trial. In the end, he was sentenced to death by the jury, and although there were multiple appeal attempts, his death warrant was signed, and on June 27, 2006, he received his sentence. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Long Island serial killer. Also known as the Craigslist Ripper, the LISK is an unidentified suspect who is believed to have taken the lives of 10 to 16 people over the last 20 years. The victims so far that are known have been sex workers who used Craigslist to advertise their work. After the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, police were searching an area along the Ocean Parkway, and that is when they began to discover the remains of the victims. The first 4 were found in December of 2010, with another 6 being found in March and April of 2011. As of December 2015, the FBI is now officially involved in the investigation. There has been a suspect in this case, but any formal charges have not been laid in terms of these crimes. The most recent evidence in regards to these cases was a belt found at the scene of the crime, which may potentially belong to the killer. At the same time, it was announced that new scientific evidence was being used in the investigation, but these announcements came just last year, so we have yet to receive any further updates. Hopefully this case is solved quickly so that the families of the victims can receive justice and this terrible person is off the streets for good. In our number 8 spot today, we have Richard Chase. This evil person is said to have taken the lives of 6 people within the span of a month between 1977 and 1978. That's a lot of people in a very short amount of time, which is absolutely terrifying. Before his crimes, Richard's life was already full of terrible stories and horrific acts that had him spending time in mental institutions before his crime spree. While at these facilities, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but after going through treatment and beginning medication, he was deemed to no longer be a threat to society and was released into his mother's care. Here's where things take a turn for the worse, however. Instead of helping take care of Richard, his mother instead weaned him off of his medication and got him all set up with his own apartment. Nice. Really helpful and cool of her. Initially, when he moved into the apartment, he had roommates, but eventually they all moved out and he was alone, which is when things really got wild. He began killing various animals, which he would then eat raw, sometimes mixing the organs with Coca-Cola in a blender and then drinking it. It's horrible. After this, he would unfortunately go on his killing spree, which had horrific details and would only end when he was startled by a visitor at the home of where his final crime took place. He fled the scene, but he was later caught and stood trial. Although there were many attempts to have him be spared of the death sentence, in the end this didn't work. In December of 1980, Richard was found passed away in his jail cell after taking too many of his prescribed medication. In our number 7 spot today, we have Rodney Alcala. Rodney is a horrible monster who was convicted and sentenced to death for 5 killings that he committed in California from 1977 to 1979. He also received an additional 25 years to life after pleading guilty to 2 other killings in New York in 1971 and 1977. Rodney got away with his crimes for a while because he wasn't the top of the list of suspects, because he was said to be the quote charming photographer. Rodney is often referred to as the dating game killer because of his appearance on the show, which, with what we now know about him, is absolutely horrifying. What's crazy is that he actually won the show he was on, but the episode's bachelorette refused to go on a date with him because she found him creepy. This is just a reminder to always trust your instincts. It isn't exactly known just how many victims Rodney had. It is potentially thought that it could be much higher than the number he was convicted for. In July of last year, Rodney passed away in prison at the age of 77. In our number 6 spot today, we have Charles Cullen. This guy used to be a nurse who took the lives of his patients throughout his career, and he may be one of the worst serial killers ever recorded. He confessed to taking the lives of 40 people, but through subsequent interviews, it became apparent that the number was way higher than 40, he just couldn't remember the names of all of them. But, of course, he could remember the details of all of his crimes against them. His crimes started in 1988 and spanned over a decade into 2003. In October of 2003, when a patient at a hospital passed away from low blood sugar, the authorities were called. This person was Charles' final victim, and authorities began looking into him and investigating his past employment history. On December 12, 2003, authorities were arresting him and charging him with only one count of his crimes, but he ended up admitting to 40. He ended up pleading guilty to his crimes and arranged a plea deal where authorities would not seek the death penalty if he cooperated. During one of his court proceedings, he continuously asked the judge to step down and apparently repeatedly chanted for 25 minutes straight, even after he was restrained and gagged for his outbursts. It is thought that his victims might be up in the 400 range, which is truly just unbelievable.
And at number 10 is Ted Kaczynski. Ted Unabomber Kaczynski was an anarchist and a mathematical prodigy. He excelled academically from an early age and has an insanely high IQ of 167. He made it into Harvard University at just 16 years old and ultimately gained a PhD in mathematics from the University of Michigan. Now, not too much later, he had become an assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley, but after handing in his resignation, things started to go downhill. The Unabomber became a hermit and moved to a remote cabin in Lincoln, Montana. Between 1978 and 1995, he took the lives of 3 people and injured 23 others with homemade explosive devices. His manifesto was published in the Washington Post after being sent to the press anonymously, and it explained that the devices were extreme but necessary to attract attention to the erosion of human freedom necessitated by modern technologies requiring large-scale organization. I didn't write that, in case you were curious. That wasn't me. Anyways, he was caught when his brother read the letters in the news, recognized Ted's handwriting, and tipped off the FBI. The Unabomber was finally caught and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Number 9, Andrew Cunanan. Andrew Cunanan was incredibly intelligent as well, with an IQ of 147, but Cunanan was also a tactical liar. He would claim that his father was an Israeli millionaire, and he displayed early signs of antisocial personality disorder. To fund the lavish lifestyle that he craved, Cunanan would make friends of wealthy older men, which worked out for him when he moved in with millionaire Norman Blatchford, who treated him to luxury cars and vacations in southern France. But that didn't last, as Blatchford finally had enough of Cunanan and he was thrown out. Now, this hit to his ego led to the passing of at least 5 different people, including Chicago tycoon Lee Miglin and Gianni Versace, on July 15, 1997. In June of 1997, Cunanan became the 449th fugitive to be listed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. It wasn't too much longer after the passing of Versace that Andrew's body was discovered in a Miami Beach houseboat, having taken his own life. Number 8, Thomas James Holden. Thomas James Holden was the first man to ever make the most wanted list of the FBI, so he kind of had to make this list. His criminal career began in the 1920s with the robbery of a mail train and didn't stop there at all. In 1930, he escaped from Leavenworth Penitentiary and was recaptured on a golf course in Kansas City. He was on parole in 1949 and drinking with his wife and her 2 brothers when an argument broke out, resulting in Holden taking the life of all 3, then fleeing with the FBI on his trail. He evaded them for quite some time, but the FBI caught him 13 months later after receiving a tip from a man in Oregon. Just a reminder, if you guys are enjoying what you're seeing, make sure to give us a like. It's all we really need to feel your support. Thanks, guys. Number 7, James Earl Ray. While Holden was the first man to make the list, James Earl Ray was the first man to make the most wanted list twice. His first crime is his most famous, as he was first wanted by by the FBI for taking the life of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. He was captured 2 months later when a customs official at Heathrow Airport recognized his alias from a Canadian wanted list, but in 1977 he escaped from a Tennessee penitentiary, leading him to be put back on that list. But not for too long, as 3 days later he was recaptured and a year was added to his sentence, bringing it up to a grand total of 100 years, which kinda seems a little pointless, but I get it. Number 6. Victor Manuel Garena. While not the most evil, especially compared to most of the others on this list, Victor Manuel Garena has the longest membership on the FBI's most wanted list. In 1984, Garena was a Wells Fargo security guard who turned on 2 fellow workers in their Wells Fargo armored car. He isn't the most evil because all he did to the 2 other co-workers is tie them up, but he then fled with $7 million taken from the truck and was literally never seen again. To this day, the FBI is still offering a $1 million reward for information leading to his arrest. It would be insane if he happened to actually be caught at this point.
Starting off this countdown, we have the double agent. One of the FBI's biggest concerns is having a double agent a part of their team, and this happened to them multiple times. One time was in 1962. So a KGB agent known as Alexei Kulak walked into the FBI office. Now this was a bold move for him because just 3 blocks away was the Soviet UN mission. An FBI agent asked him if he was worried that they were watching the FBI building, and he replied with, "No, all of your people are out covering a meeting with your guy Dick." And that one sentence started a lengthy investigation. Who was Dick? Clearly, they thought he was a double agent. They spent decades trying to find this spy on their staff. At first, they interviewed anyone named Dick or Richard, while trying to keep everything hush-hush so that the mole wouldn't find out. They went through thousands of agents and spent countless hours trying to find this man. To this day, the FBI is maintaining its silence on this. Moving on to number 9, we have Ricky McCormick. On June 30th, 1999, the body of Ricky McCormick was found in a cornfield in West Alton, Missouri. In his pocket were 2 pages of handwritten notes. The notes were written in a complex cipher. They consisted of a number of random letters and numbers. The FBI believes that, and I quote, "breaking this code could reveal the victim's whereabouts before his death and could lead to the solution of a homicide." However, so far it's been impossible to crack. The FBI does believe that Ricky was murdered, and we still don't know why or by who. In our 8th spot, we have Jerome Azell. On November 7th, 2017, Jerome Azell was reported missing in Lansing, Michigan. Later, police found his car, but there were no signs of Jerome. That was until over a month later. On December 12th, 2018, Jerome was found dead in a wooden area. Foul play is suspected. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. The FBI is offering up to $10,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for the murder of Jerome. In our 7th spot, we have Operation Ghost Stories. Around the early 2000s, the FBI learned that there were multiple sets of Russian spies in the US posing as everyday Americans. That's when Operation Ghost Stories came into play, and this was one of the largest counterintelligence investigations in history. In the end, it led to the arrest of 10 agents by 2010, and this was not an easy thing to do. Nonetheless, learning about potential spies is one thing that the FBI fears. Coming in at number 6, we have the Zodiac Killer. Just last year, it was announced that the infamous serial killer known as the Zodiac Killer was identified. However, the supposed killer, a man named Gary Francis Port, died in 2018. But the FBI clearly knows something that we don't know, because shortly after they shut down the claim that Gary was the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is believed to be responsible for at least 5 murders in Northern California from 1968 to 1969. But the killer would write notes and taunt the police and claim to have killed as many as 37 people. This has been a cold case forever. The FBI says that the case is still open and shut down any claims that the killer was identified.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Long Island serial killer. Also known as the Craigslist Ripper, the LISK is an unidentified suspect who is believed to have taken the lives of 10 to 16 people over the last 20 years. The victims so far that are known have been sex workers who used Craigslist to advertise their work. After the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, police were searching an area along the Ocean Parkway, and that is when they began to discover the remains of the victims. The first 4 were found in December of 2010, with another 6 being found in March and April of 2011. As of December 2015, the FBI is now officially involved in the investigation. There has been a suspect in the case, but any formal charges have not been laid in terms of these crimes. The most recent evidence in regards to the case was a belt found at the scene of the crime, which may potentially belong to the killer. At the same time, it was announced that new scientific evidence was being used in the investigation, but these announcements came just last year, so we have yet to receive any further updates. Hopefully this case is solved quickly so that the family of the victims can receive justice and this terrible person is off the streets for good. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Watcher. In the summer of 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus had just bought their new 6-bedroom, $1.3 million home in Westfield, New Jersey, and began to do some renovations prior to them moving in. While sorting through some of the mail, they found a small white envelope addressed to, quote, the new owner, so they opened it up and began reading. The letter started off with warm greetings, but quickly turned strange. The couple knew the letter was directed to them because it had mentioned the vehicle they drove, the couple's children, as well as the writer's distaste for the renovations that were being done. If this letter wasn't already creepy enough, it was signed off as The Watcher. I cannot explain to you guys how quickly I would have had that house back up for sale if I received this letter. Over the next few weeks, the family continued to receive more letters from The Watcher, and the letters began to include more personal information. The couple was unsure of where to go or if they should continue their move into this new house, to which I would say, absolutely not. People began to speculate who the Watcher could be, but there was no concrete evidence, and to this day, we still don't know. In our number 8 spot today, we have Amy Lynn Bradley. On March 21st, 1998, Amy and her family boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, which was a Royal Caribbean cruise. On March 24th, after a fun night on the ship, Amy was hanging out and having a couple drinks with the ship's band, and one of the members explained that she parted ways with them around 1 a.m. After this, around 5:15 a.m., Amy's father said he saw her sleeping on the cabin balcony. Unfortunately, however, once 6 a.m. rolled around, she wasn't there anymore, and this was the beginning of the mystery. Once it was realized that Amy was missing, extensive searches were launched for full days before they ended up being called off when no signs or traces of Amy had been found. While this is all super mysterious and nobody really had anything to go on, the plot only thickens with this story. After her disappearance, people began to report seeing Amy. One sighting was by Canadian tourists in 1998 who said that they had seen a woman who resembled Amy and who had tattoos that matched hers on a beach. A member of the United States Navy said that he saw her in a brothel and said that she told him her name was Amy and she asked for help, saying she wasn't allowed to leave. The most recent alleged sighting comes in 2005 when a woman claimed she saw Amy in a department store in Barbados. She said that Amy entered the restroom with 3 men who then threatened her if she didn't follow through on some sort of a deal. The men left briefly and the witness said the woman turned to her and said her name was Amy and that she was from Virginia and needed help, but the men returned right after to take her away again. This story is devastatingly sad and has so many turns, and to this day no one knows exactly what happened to Amy or if these witness sightings were accurate at all. In our number 7 spot today, we have Lester Eubanks. If you're a fan of unsolved mysteries, you might be familiar with this story. Lester is a man who was convicted and sentenced to prison in 1966 for taking someone's life. In December of 1973, Lester was part of an honor assignment that gave him the opportunity to be at the mall to do some Christmas shopping. While at the mall, he ended up escaping custody and has been on the run ever since. Through investigations into his family and friends, police were led to a center for troubled youth where he was said to have been working, but Lester was nowhere to be found when they got there. The most recent development in this case came recently in 2019 when Lester's biological son agreed to give a DNA sample which could be used to link Lester to recent crimes and maybe give an idea on where he could be hiding, but FBI FBI policy says you cannot search using a family member's DNA. It's crazy that someone could be on the run for that long without anyone recognizing or finding them, and it makes me really wonder if anyone in his new life knows about his dark past. In our number 6 spot today we have Jim Gray. Jim Gray was an incredibly important computer scientist who was responsible for many computer advancements that changed things for all of us. Other than being a computer scientist, he was also an experienced and skilled sailor, and one day on January 28, 2007, he set sail for a short trip so he could head out and spread his mother's ashes as she had recently passed away. As he began his trip, Jim spoke to his wife on the phone and said he would call her once he got back in range. After their phone call, he called his daughter as well and left a little message for her, and then he was off on his trip, but unfortunately he never ended up returning. Jim's wife, Donna, was the one who raised the alarm bells as she was away on a trip, but like I mentioned, Jim said he would call her later, and he never did. This is the point when the huge searches begin. Thousands of images of the area where Jim or his boat might be were uploaded to the Amazon Mechanical Turk for people to look through and see if they could find any kind of signs, but to no avail. Jim also had an automatic emergency position indicating beacon on his ship, but whatever happened to Jim and the ship clearly didn't meet the requirements, or perhaps it had some sort of malfunction, or maybe it was even turned off. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jim or his boat, as no sign or trace of either has ever been found. The theories of what may have happened are endless and range from Jim intentionally disappearing to him being kidnapped for his computer skills and brain in order to do some kind of inside job, and literally everything in between. There most definitely are theories that are seemingly more likely than others, but at the end of the day, they are all a possibility.
Starting off this countdown, we have Walt Disney. Turns out that Walt Disney was a secret FBI informant. Who would have guessed? Not me. I hope his codename was like Mickey Mouse or something. Anyways, from 1940 until his death in 1966, Walt Disney was a secret informer for the LA office of the FBI. He was to report to the office any un-American activities. And according to a number of leaked reports, Disney gave up the names of several Hollywood celebs who he thought were suspicious. And by suspicious, I mean he suspected them of being communists. And apparently his service really helped the FBI because in 1954 he was named Full Special Agent in Charge Contact. I mean, that's pretty cool. This dude practically was living a double life. On one side, he was a cheery owner of an amusement park, and on the other side, he was a top secret FBI informant. Moving on, at number 9, we have Dorothy's Lost Ruby Slippers. Apparently, the FBI are huge fans of The Wizard of Oz. Why? Well, they spent 10 years looking for Judy Garland's lost ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. In 2005, they were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in Minnesota. And instead of having local police investigate, they had the FBI doing the investigation. Like, damn, how serious are those shoes? FBI's Minneapolis field office said, and I quote, "Our top priority was the safe recovery of the slippers." Dude, top priority? Some murder cases aren't even given top priority. That's the tea. But in case you guys were worried, they did manage to locate the shoes. But like I said, it took 10 years of their efforts for this. In our 8th spot, we have the Bigfoot in Oregon. In 1976, the FBI officially investigated the Bigfoot in Oregon. It all started when they came across a tuft of hair snagged on the bark of a tree. People were like, oh my god, it has to be Bigfoot hair. Plus, that site was notorious for Bigfoot sightings. So the FBI collected the hair sample and ran DNA tests on it. 42 years later, the FBI concluded that the sample was from a deer. Why did it take 42 years until the FBI made this news public? A lot of people think that they know more than they're letting on to. In our 7th spot, we have ESP. Here's another good example of FBI wasting time and money on a secret project. This project was called Project Stargate. And basically, they wanted to see if ESP could be used as part of international spying. They spent more than 3 years researching into this, until they finally concluded that it wasn't possible. On top of that, between 1972 to 1995, the Pentagon spent $20 million using psychics to try and spy on their enemies and see what they were up to. So they enlisted the help of men and women who claimed to have ESP powers. They would then help them find hostages or would trace the path of criminals on the run. They thought that they were onto something here until they realized that there was no scientific proof behind ESP, and in the end they wasted millions of dollars. In our 6th spot, we have the DNA. Have you ever got your DNA analyzed, maybe to find out more about your family tree or family history or for genetic analysis? Well, if you have, then there is a possibility that the FBI now has records of your DNA. Basically, they are collecting this DNA history to create a DNA profile for you. This is actually the way that the FBI solved the case of the Golden State Killer. So if there ever is an unsolved case and they recover DNA from the crime scene, then they can upload this to their handy dandy site and see if it matches any of the people who have gotten their DNA analyzed in the past. It's pretty crazy.
Starting off this countdown, we have the secret entrances. Just last year, a man claimed to have found 3 hidden entrances that lead to Area 51. He discovered this after using Google Earth. He compared images of the base from different time periods. In one particular area in 1998, there seems to be no roads or entrance. Satellite pictures of that same location in 2005, 2010, and 2013 show a road and a dead end with what looks like an entrance and tunnel carved into a mountain. In fact, at the dead end, there appears to be cars parked there. Seems unusual for people to just park there, because what is around for them to do? Wander the barren plain alone? No, they're parking their cars there and then entering Area 51 through this secret entrance. In our 9th spot, we have the alien craft. What I'm about to show you is a leaked video and some photos from Area 51 of an alien spacecraft test. The video features a flying object hovering in the sky and moving in ways that other crafts definitely don't do. This was recorded on May 15, 2017, and then was leaked years later. If this isn't actually a UFO, then what could it be? That's what's baffling people. The way it just moves up and down and side to side that quickly is very strange, especially because of its size. What do you think though? Is this proof that Area 51 has gotten their hands on an alien spacecraft? Moving on to number 8, we have the transportation of a UFO. When this next photo was leaked online, it was met with a number of conspiracy theories. So this is the image of the CIA transporting a large part for one of their top secret projects. In fact, when this was getting transported, the CIA sealed off the entire highway. And I'm sure you can see why this was met with a number of conspiracy theories. Like, look at the shape of the thing that they're transporting. That is definitely a UFO or part of a UFO spaceship. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. Somehow, a group of bikers made it onto the road. When they were stopped by some soldiers, they asked what they were transporting, and the soldier said they found a UFO up in the mountains. Now apparently he said this jokingly, but who knows? In our 7th spot, we have the Tic Tac UFO. Last year, another UFO was spotted near Area 51. This one was given the name the Tic Tac UFO because of its tic tac shape and white or bright appearance. So this spacecraft was caught on footage by a person driving along near Area 51. He was driving along the extraterrestrial highway. That's the name given to the highway in Nevada, as a number of UFOs have been seen by drivers while on this route. At first, the driver thought that what he was seeing was just a cloud. When he got closer to it, he realized that it was definitely a craft of some kind. Later on, alien hunter Scott Waring confirmed that the UFO was in fact alien in origin. Also, the area in which he was driving through had a number of wind farms in the area. Turns out that in the past, a lot of UFOs have been spotted around wind farms, and one UFO even crashed into a windmill many years back. Some say this is because aliens are fascinated with human technology. In our 6th spot, we have Stephen Barron. In 2016, UFO hunter Steve Barron captured video and photographic evidence of another alien spacecraft close to Area 51. These were taken near his home in Las Vegas, Nevada, an hour drive from Area 51. Using a night vision camera, Steve head out to Red Rock Canyon to try and capture a UFO. The first couple of hours, there was nothing. Then he saw mysterious weird flashing lights appear over a mountain. He said this in regards to the UFO and its lights, and I quote, "First one, then two, then more and more. They put on a spectacular show. I am glad I was patient because the show they put on kept getting better and better." We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the CIA spy plane. In 2011, Los Angeles Times journalist Annie Jacobson published a book called Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base. In the book, she included a number of never-before-seen photos of the base. The first one I want to show you is of a CIA spy plane. This photo shows an A-12 ox cart hidden behind a barrier at Area 51. This was a top secret plane that was created to reach high speeds and altitudes. During the first 3 years of testing this plane, everything was kept top secret. In fact, the pilots weren't even allowed to tell their wives what they were working on. On May 24, 1963, during a test flight, the plane crashed. The pilot, Ken Collins, was fine but had to eject himself out of the plane. But afterwards, the CIA actually injected him with sodium pentothal, aka truth serum, to then interrogate him after the crash. That's crazy. In our fourth spot, we have the rare photo. So this photo was also featured in Annie Jacobson's book Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base. In fact, this is a very rare photo that has never been published before. It was published for the first time in Annie's book, and that's it. This photo is an aerial view of Area 51 taken in 1964. I don't know why it was kept a secret for so long or how Annie got her hands on it, but she did and decided to share it with the world. Moving on at number 3, we have the early U-2 spy planes. In the early 1950s, at the peak of the Cold War, the CIA began to develop planes that they wanted to reach an altitude of 70,000 feet to avoid detection against Soviet radar. This gave birth to the U-2 spy planes that you see here in this picture. This photo was taken in Area 51 in 1956, and pictures of workers standing on the plane's wing. Sadly, at least 3 pilots lost their lives during test flights, including 2 at Area 51 and 1 at an Air Force base in Germany. Coming in at number 2, we have Boyd Bushman. Shortly before his death, former Area 51 engineer Boyd Bushman revealed that he encountered aliens while working at Area 51. In a video, Bushman shows a number of mysterious photos to the camera, including one of an alien and a number of photos of the alien's appendages.
We have a total of at least 18 that exist and operate with our facility.
Now, many people believe that this man is telling the truth. Why? Because he had nothing to gain or lose by sharing his story. Plus, an interrogator with the police studied Boyd's movements and speech pattern during this interview, and he said that it appears as if he's telling the truth. In the interview, he said that Area 51 has at least 18 of these aliens in their facility. He also claims that there are 2 groups of aliens. One group are called the Wranglers, the others are called the Rustlers. The aliens that are considered Wranglers are friendly and have a better relationship with humans. Rustlers, however, have been known to steal cattle. This is all insane. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Boyd Bushman and the UFO. During his interview, Boyd Bushman also revealed photos of real UFO spacecrafts that he saw while working at Area 51.
Up close and personal, this is a UFO which is ready to take off.
So that's a close-up photo of a UFO spacecraft taking off. Then he also showed a different photo of a UFO spacecraft with its lights turned off. What do you think though? Is Boyd telling the truth? Are those real photos of UFOs? Let me know in the comments below.
We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with your fingerprints. Even if you've never been arrested before, the FBI still might have your fingerprints on file. Now, it's not what you think. They're not going around waiting for you to toss out a coffee cup so that they can then retrieve it from the trash and dust for fingerprints. No, let me explain. So, if you've ever had your fingerprints taken as part as a background check, the FBI now has them in their integrated automated fingerprint identification system. This could include getting fingerprints taken for your driver's license, for a job background check, or if you bought a gun. This database has more than 100 million fingerprints on file. What's crazy is that even with that many fingerprints on file, the FBI can find a match within 12 minutes. In our 4th spot, we have Project Greek Island. Project Greek Island is the name given to a secret bunker built under the Greenbrier Hotel in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. This might look like a normal luxury resort on the outside, but there's a full-on bunker under there. It was built in 1961 and it's over 112,000 square feet. It contains enough rooms to accommodate just over 1,000 people. It was built as a shelter for members of Congress in case of a nuclear bomb. In 1992, a Washington reporter somehow found out about this secret shelter and exposed it to the world. Shortly after, the bunker was decommissioned. They really did not want people knowing about it. So that just means that they packed up and built a new bunker somewhere else. I wonder where. In our third spot, we have the Vault. The Vault is the FBI's library containing nearly 7,000 documents on people or cases. This media has been scanned and then uploaded online. The wildest part is everyone has access to this due to the Freedom of Information Act. So if you want to read up on a potential case file that they have against you, you can. Some of the most famous case files in the Vault include Marilyn Monroe, Steve Jobs, John Lennon, and Elvis Presley. All of these celebrities have case files for a number of reasons, not just for criminal activity. For example, most of the celebrities in their files were there because they were suspected to be communists, including Marilyn Monroe. So if the FBI thinks you are a threat, then they'll create a file on you, which is absolutely insane. Honestly, after this video, I'll probably have a file on me, so fun. In our second spot, we have the Stingray interceptors. In late 2012, it was revealed that the FBI had a new secretive security device. It was known as Stingray. Basically, it was a fake cell phone tower planted all over the place that can lock onto all devices in that area. They then could find out a cell phone's location, intercept phone calls, and potentially texts as well, which a number of people called unconstitutional because it's literally invading your privacy. Well, the FBI has gone to great lengths to cover up the technology's capabilities. In fact, they refuse to tell judges all of its abilities. But don't worry, they are being forced to confess what they're up to. And in our number one spot today, we have the license plate readers. All across America, the FBI is installing automated license plate readers. Why are they doing this? Well, their aim is to create databases of location information, aka who was in what area at what time. So these scanners are mounted by the side of roads and it scans every car that passes by. It then collects all the data and stores it, which seems crazy. They literally will have records of everywhere you go. It's like they're tracking your every move. A report revealed that in Washington alone, nearly every block has more than 250 of these cameras. These cameras scan 1,800 images per minute. It seems intrusive, but it's the FBI's way of trying to solve crimes quicker, or keep an eye on its citizens.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Patricia Meehan. This is a story that really gives me the creeps because it's just so strange. On April 20th, 1989, Patricia Bernadette Meehan was in a car accident on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana. Witnesses saw her driving her car on the wrong side of the road, which led to her crashing into an off-duty police dispatcher, Carol Heights. Carol was luckily uninjured in the crash and got out of her vehicle right away. Upon exiting her vehicle, Carol saw Patricia also exit her vehicle, walk up to her, and just stare at her without saying a word. Patricia then walked away, climbing over a fence, and stood staring at the accident before walking away and then disappearing. Like, I have goosebumps just talking about this right now. I'm not even joking. It's the weirdest thing. A search began immediately but turned up little results. There have been thousands of reported sightings of Patricia that have potentially given police leads to her whereabouts, but she still has never been found. In our number 4 spot today, we have Lauren Spirer. On June 3rd, 2011, in Bloomington, Indiana, 20-year-old university student Lauren disappeared after a night out with friends. Lauren was from Greenburgh, New York, but had been attending Indiana University. A few hours after being seen leaving her apartment, her boyfriend texted her, only to receive a response several hours later from an employee of a bar who had found her phone. Not much is known about Lauren's disappearance, but it's said she left her apartment at around 12:30 a.m., stopped at the bar where her phone was found, and was last seen around 4:30 a.m. leaving a friend's off-campus apartment. Over the course of the years, Lauren's family has tried following every lead they have to find out what happened to her, but have yet to find the answers that they deserve. In our number 3 spot today, we have George Smith. George Allen Smith and his wife Jennifer Hagel Smith had just married and were aboard the MS Brilliance of the Seas, which is a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, as they were doing a Mediterranean cruise for their honeymoon. On July 5th, 2005, the ship was somewhere just off of the coast of Turkey when it was discovered that George had disappeared. weird. The night he was last seen, he was intoxicated from both alcohol as well as prescription drugs, and there was blood evidence found in his cabin as well as on the side of the ship. There were two main theories in regards to his disappearance, the first being that his intoxication led to him falling overboard the ship, and the other was that perhaps a robbery had gone bad and foul play had been involved. This case was investigated for over a decade, with even the FBI and their mafia division getting involved at one point, but despite this, neither George, his body, or what really happened to him has ever been found. There have been many assumptions made over the years, but 16 years later it is still a mystery. In our number 2 spot today we have the cattle crimes. Okay, so for this one there were some documents that became declassified, and this is when they revealed this really grim FBI investigation that took place in the mid-1970s at the request of US Senators Floyd Haskell of Colorado and Carl Curtis of Nebraska. I guess there was some weird sort of connection between these horrific things being done to cattle across as many as 21 states. In a letter from 1975, Senator Haskell was able to identify 130 of these strange, macabre cases in Colorado alone. All of the cases were eerily similar, which is really unsettling considering the details. In most of these cases, the cattle would have their left ear, left eye, rectum, and reproductive organs all missing. All of the blood was drained from the carcasses, but there was no blood on the ground around them, nor were there any footprints. How absolutely horrifying is that? Some people chose to believe that the cause for these was mysterious helicopters and UFOs, but there's a letter from Senator Curtis to the FBI director that says, quote, "The series of incidents stretching from Oklahoma to Nebraska in which cattle have been dismembered in some kind of strange witchcraft cult." I'm not gonna lie, I don't think UFOs or witches did it. It wasn't until 1979 that the FBI was granted jurisdiction to begin investigating these weird happenings, and when they did, they determined that most of the instances were a result of, quote, "normal predator and scavenger activity." And while that answer sounds a little fishy at best, the documents went forward to reveal that not all of the instances could be accounted for. Also, the idea of it being a completely normal scenario also contradicts reports that say that the techniques used in these horrible instances were very professional and sometimes even referred to as being conducted with surgical precision. I'm sorry, but a wolf or a coyote or a bear or whatever predator you want to say did this, ripping apart its meal isn't exactly a surgically precise operation. No arrests were ever made, and while it was deemed solved, a ton of mystery still surrounds these stories to this day. In our number 1 spot today we have the Yuba County Five. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, California attended a basketball game at California State University. All 5 men went missing after this night, and several days later the group's car was found abandoned in a remote area of the Plumas National Forest that was way out of the way from where they would have been. There was no reason for the car to have been abandoned because it was in totally fine working condition when it was found. In June of 1978, 4 of the men were found passed away near a trailer camp that was deep in the forest, but the 5th man has still never been found. There is a lot of strange information about this case, such as how one of them starved to death even though he was surrounded by food. There's truly too much to cover about this story that I unfortunately don't have time for, so if you're interested, I would highly recommend looking up this case, as it truly is unexplainable and just totally terrifying. There's a really great recent My Favorite Murder episode where Karen really dives into this story if you want to hear more.
We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Cliven Bundy. This was a huge scandal for the FBI, as they were found to be withholding and destroying key evidence in this case. So basically in 2014, Bundy and his sons and supporters were involved in an armed standoff with the Bureau of Land Management due to unpaid cattle grazing fees and restrictions. In January of 2018, a federal judge threw out all the criminal charges against Bundy. A part of this was due to the fact that the FBI misplaced or hid a thumb drive with key evidence to this case. It's very messy, and the FBI got in huge trouble for it. In our 4th spot today, we have the Russians. During Trump's presidency, the FBI actually opened a case to look into whether Trump was actually working alongside the Russians or not. And if he wasn't, they knew he was badly compromised. They said that he was compromised for, and I quote, his questionable business dealings, the hush money paid on his behalf to silence women, shady transactions at his charity, and most importantly, his lies about his Russian dealings, including his secret 2015 effort to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, even as he told the world that he had no business with Russia. So Trump's secret ties with Russia and Putin certainly had the FBI concerned. In our third spot today, we have Pizzagate. In March 2016, the personal Gmail account of a former White House chief of staff and chair of Hillary Clinton's 2016 US presidential campaign was hacked, and his emails revealed some pretty disturbing things. They believe that Hillary and other people of power are part of a trafficking ring. In the emails, they use code words like pizza, cheese pizza, and hot dogs. Seems weird. Like, the emails say things like, and I quote, "I'm dreaming about your hot dog stand in Hawaii." Clearly, there's a hidden message there. Another email said Obama spent $65K on pizza and hot dogs. Again, probably another coded message. Whatever was going on, the FBI was concerned, and they were on the case trying to decipher the emails and get down to the bottom of what was really going on. Coming in at number 2, we have Alcatraz. In June of 1962, 3 inmates, John Anglin, his brother Clarence, and Frank Morris, escaped Alcatraz Supermax prison. They put dummy heads that they had made of plaster and flesh-tone paint in their beds to fool the night guards. They then crawled through ventilation ducts between their sinks that they had been widening for quite some time and got out into an unmonitored corridor and then hopped over the cell wall. They then used a raft that they made using over 50 raincoats, among other stolen and donated materials, and they set off into the waters. The prisoners were never caught. For 17 years, the FBI worked on this case, trying to figure out if the escapees survived or if they were on the run. They officially closed the case on December 31st, 1979. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Alonzo Brooks. On April 3rd, 2004, Alonzo Brooks disappeared after attending a house party with his friends. He was supposed to get a ride home with his friends, but one of the friends got lost on the trip to buy cigarettes and never returned back to give Brooks a ride back home. That evening, he never returned home. The following day, his boots and hat were found across the street from the home where the party took place. The local sheriff's department and Kansas State investigators searched the area in the following days, but found nothing. That was until May 1st. Alonzo's family decided to take matters into their own hands and to search the area themselves. And that's when they found Alonzo's body. Rumor has it that his body was being preserved in a freezer while police were out searching for him and then later dumped there. Several years later, the FBI announced that they were reinvestigating the case, and a new autopsy concluded that Alonzo's cause of death was homicide. So now the hunt is on to find Alonzo's killer or killers. Someone knows who did it and they're not speaking up.
Number 5, Omar August Pinson. Omar August Pinson brings us back to the more evil side of things, as he was convicted of slaying an on-duty Oregon police officer before he made a jailbreak. Omar managed to evade capture on the run for almost a year, and even made it out of a shootout in January 1950 with Montana police completely unscathed. The problem for Pinson here came when a car salesman identified him and gave the FBI enough clues to track him down. He was recaptured in September 1950 and returned to prison, making parole in the early 70s. Number 4, William Bradford Bishop Jr. William Bradford Bishop Jr. made the list for pretty brutally taking the life of his wife, mother, and he disappeared in 1976. In the next few years, witnesses claim to have seen him in several different locations overseas, but he still hasn't been caught. Bishop wasn't added to the FBI's most wanted list until 2014, when the Bureau had produced an age-advanced image of him to aid in his capture, but it failed to turn up any leads, and 2 years later he was dropped from the list again. He would now be 84 years old if he is still alive, but we just might not ever know, which is kinda not a great feeling. Number 3, Robert William Fisher. Robert Fisher is actually on the current FBI most wanted list for taking the life of his wife and their 2 children before blowing up the house that they all lived in Scottsdale, Arizona in April 2001. He was described as a cruel and distant control freak towards his family. He and his wife would fight a lot, and Fisher was embarrassed that his son Bobby did not like to hunt or fish, and once tried to teach him and his daughter how to swim by throwing them off of a boat. Fisher was also very controlling about the house they lived in, not allowing the walls in the house to be painted anything other than white, and only a small number of pictures were allowed on the wall. Any sentimental objects of his wife's had to be kept hidden away. He's still out there, so watch out. Number 2, Eduardo Ravello. Guess what? I have another guy who is included on the current FBI's most wanted list, just to keep you a little on your toes, you know? Eduardo Ravello was indicted in Texas in 2008 for his alleged involvement in racketeering activities, conspiracy to launder monetary instruments, aka money, and conspiracy to possess substances with the intent to distribute them. His criminal activities began in 2003, and Ravello is known to be a captain within the Barrio Azteca American-Mexican criminal enterprise, and is allegedly responsible for issuing orders to the Barrio Azteca members, who allegedly act as hitmen for an even bigger substance trafficking organization. Apparently, in total, they are responsible for a whole number of lost lives. Ravello himself has ties to Mexico and El Paso, Texas, and it's presumed that he may have had plastic surgery and altered his fingerprints, but he's still out and about at the moment. And in at number 1 is Ted Bundy. I bet you were wondering if more recognizable names would show up on this list. Well, you were right. The vicious serial killer Ted Bundy was actually a 2-time member of the FBI's most wanted list, who committed his first known killing in 1974. Following his first, Bundy unfortunately took 12 more lives during his time until one of his victims escaped, but even then, before he could actually be arrested in 1975, he did it again 5 more times. During his 1977 trial, he escaped from the courthouse through a window and was most wanted for 6 days before recapture, but like I said, he was on that list twice, as later that year he escaped again. He committed 3 more attacks and took 2 more lives before finally being stopped for driving a stolen car. Thankfully, this monster can never escape again, as he was put to the electric chair in 1989.
In our number 5 spot today, we have John Allen Muhammad and John Lee Malvo. This pair is referred to as the DC Snipers, and they were responsible for a series of coordinated attacks during a 3-week period in October of 2002. The pair took the lives of 10 people and critically injured 3 others during this spree, although their crimes spanned even before this and involved even more people. Their crimes were random and terrifying. People would just be going about their everyday tasks when this horrific pair would strike. Through a series of quote-unquote mistakes the pair made, they were able to be caught by authorities and arrested. In September of 2003, John Allen was sentenced to death, and this sentence was carried out in November of 2009. John Lee, on the other hand, was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences, but very recently it was determined that his sentence needs to be re-looked at because of his young age when the crimes were committed. In our number 4 spot today, we have Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris. A 2-for-1 of the most horrific kind, this pair was often referred to as the Toolbox Killers. They received this name because most of what they used to commit their crimes would be items normally stored in a household toolbox. The pair committed 5 of these crimes in Southern California over a 5-month period in 1979. In the end, what led to their capture was when Roy met up with a friend with whom he had previously been incarcerated with. He confessed to the crimes to this person in great detail, and you know what this person did? They consulted their attorney about this horrifying confession, who then advised them to go to the authorities with the information. Thank goodness. Authorities, while they didn't have the evidence necessary to charge the men with the crimes at that time, were able to, through surveillance, find other things to arrest them for, while they searched their homes to find the evidence that they really did need. The pair stood trial, and in the end, Lawrence was sentenced to death, and Roy, who accepted a plea bargain and agreed to testify against Lawrence, received a life sentence. Lawrence died of natural causes while on death row in December of 2019, as did Roy at the California Medical Facility in 2020. FBI Special Agent John E. Douglas described Lawrence as the most disturbing individual for whom he has ever created a criminal profile. In our number 3 spot today, we have Robert Hansen. Robert is often referred to as the Butcher Baker, and his story truly is horrific. He is one of the most prolific serial killers in Alaska's history because for over a decade he would kidnap women and bring them into the wilderness, where he would then stalk them like prey. The reason he got away with his crimes for so long is because outside of these horrifying crimes, he was just a soft-spoken baker. Robert was heading to church by day and prowling the streets at night. What led to the downfall of this horrible monster was a badass named Cindy Paulson, who was able to escape from Robert and was sure to leave evidence behind. She then went to authorities and told them what happened, and this led to a search warrant for Robert's property, which is where all the evidence they needed lied. Robert is believed to have taken the lives of at least 17 women, and in 1983 he was sentenced to 4 461 years and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In our number 2 spot today, we have William Bonin. This horrible person is said to be responsible for taking the lives of 21 young men in Southern California from May of 1979 to June 1980. It is said that on at least 12 of these occasions, he was assisted by one of his 4 known accomplices, and it is even speculated that he might be responsible for 15 more of these crimes that evidence hasn't officially been able to connect him to. He was often referred to as the freeway killer because of the fact that most of the bodies were found along the freeway of Southern California. The police surveilled William until they could catch him in the act, which they did. In the beginning, he claimed innocence. I mean, they caught him in the act. It's kind of dumb to claim innocence, but after receiving an impassioned letter from one of the victim's mothers, which asked him to please share the location of her son's body, he confessed his guilt. But he made sure to clarify that it wasn't so the mother could be at peace or so that her pain could be eased. No, of course not. Instead, he said, quote, "I was dying for a hamburger and I knew if I went out with the cops they would get me a hamburger." At his first trial, the prosecutor described him as, quote, "the most arch-evil person who ever existed." William was convicted on 14 of his crimes and was sentenced to death. He spent 14 years on death row before his sentence was carried out in 1996. In our number 1 spot today, we have Israel Keyes. Israel is quite a prolific serial killer and truly is a terrifying person. While everyone on this list is horrible, Israel is particularly scary because of the fact that he had no MO or type. He just killed at random. In fact, he was so prepared for these random crimes that he left kill kits all over the US so that he would be prepared for whenever whoever he chose crossed his path. It isn't quite clear how many of these crimes he committed, and many missing persons reports that are still open could potentially be linked to him. It is said that Israel had a sort of admiration and obsession with other prolific serial killers like Ted Bundy or Robert Hansen, who we already talked about today. He even said, quote, "I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine." So creepy. In March of 2012, Israel was finally apprehended and was to stand trial for his crimes, but unfortunately, while waiting for trial, he went on to take his own life. He left behind a note and a drawing of 11 skulls, which led authorities to believe that this may be the number of victims he had. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about sightings of the thought-to-be-extinct creature, the titanoboa. Now, this creature was thought to be extinct for the last couple of million years, but there has been some concerning footage that might show that it's still alive and well. Click the video now to find out more. See you in the next video.